right, let's not delay. Let's bring in my panel. Sky News host of Outsiders, Rowan Dean, and New South Wales One Nation leader, Mark LATHAM in Sydney. Mark, I'm going to go to you first. What I thought was the most powerful point that he made in this speech today, Donald Trump, was when he talked about don't be mistaken that there's a content-free agenda there from the Democrats, that Joe Biden doesn't have a plan. He has a plan. It's extremely radical, and he doesn't want to tell you about it this side of the election. I thought that was so strong. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought that, and it played into three other elements in his speech that he spoke powerfully about the importance of American values, freedom, enterprise, the capacity to speak your mind. I thought all his points about political correctness towards the back end of the speech were outstanding, and he said that against the Bernie Sanders, AOC, Democrat platform, the radical agenda that Biden has now adopted as the Democrat nominee. He also spoke about law and order. It would be very unusual in the history of American politics if law and order is the frontline issue come November for the Republicans to lose, and possibly this is a replay of Richard Nixon's winning campaign on law and order in 1972. But the third element of the speech, third other major element of the speech, is probably the one that's most worrying for Trump. Both he and Mike Pence in their speeches paid a lot of attention to try and restore their credibility and credentials on the coronavirus management, which I would have thought Republican polling would be showing that's his electoral weakness. So they've tried to fill that hole to repair the problem. And the two strengths they'd have would be on the law and order agenda and the appeal to American greatness, patriotism and values. I thought that line that how can the Democrats be asking to run the country when all they do is attack the country? I thought that was very powerful indeed.
Rowan, there was a lot of detail in the Republican convention that was absent. I mean, a lot of emotion, theatre in the Democrat event the week before, a lot of detail here. Just talking to John Anderson before, you know, he was around at a time in politics where there was a contest of ideas. Both sides would put their agenda on the table. We'd all have a good look at it as voters and you'd fight and debate about it. But in the end, you knew what you were getting at the election, what you were voting for. That's disappearing, particularly on the left. We see all of this legislation rammed through parliaments. It wasn't discussed and ventilated prior to elections. What did you make of the President's speech today?
I thought it was sensational, slightly too long maybe, but it was superb. And the killer line was, they want to tear statues down, we want to build America up. And you can't argue with that. That is the essence of the difference. Donald Trump said that it is the most important election ever. Now, there's a bit of hyperbole, as Julia Gillard was wont to say. But in some ways, it is true, because for the first time, we actually have, in American politics, a political party in the Democrats that is so weak that is overrun by basically Marxists, communists, socialists, and it is finally an American election about socialism versus capitalism. And there hasn't really, I mean, there have been, you know, obviously leftist movements in the past, but not to the extent of this one. And Trump is absolutely right to keep on nailing the fact that Biden has been in politics for so long, 47 years, he kept mentioning, and achieved nothing. Trump has achieved so much more in 3 years, but ultimately it is a test between a basic socialist agenda or a capitalist agenda.
Yeah, they're using Biden as the sort of the soft front for the hard left. And so this will be, you know, whether or not it can all be unpicked in the next sort of 60 odd days or so before people go to the polls. I want to go to another issue. We talked about it for most of this week since the Prime Minister made this announcement in relation to foreign interference and these veto powers. There's a big push by his backbench, led by Andrew Hastie, who's on the Intelligence and Security Committee. He's the chair of that committee. He wants to see a proper inquiry, and it's supported by the Labor members on that committee, into our university sector. He is saying that, you know, this is a quote, many of us aren't confident that our universities are properly regulating themselves or that they're managing conflicts of interest. This all goes back, Mark, to the 1,000 Talents program that the Chinese frontman, who was in the media during the week at the National Press Club, refused to rule out was espionage. Now, if the PM's serious, this committee should be allowed to do this inquiry.
Well, I'm already doing it, Peter. The Upper House Education Committee I chair is just starting up. In fact, we've got hearings in the next couple of weeks with the universities in New South Wales to look at political interference from overseas, but also the whole management question about their finances, how overexposed they became to Chinese foreign student income, questions of freedom on the campus, quality of teaching, quality of student freedom and capacity to learn. What is the future of these massively overbuilt city-like campuses that they've constructed on the back of Chinese money? So we're doing that inquiry for the reason that all these universities, some might say it's a throwback and it's not a modern thing, but whether we like it or not, all these universities are enabled and enacted by state legislation. And if any university fell over financially, the state government would own all their assets. So there's still a state involvement here, and we'll be having a good look at it. Andrew Hastie, I think, is slow to this argument. I mean, it doesn't take Chinese political interference to make you think that the universities have been poorly run and poorly managed for many, many years now, and both federal and state inquiries into them would be well overdue. The tide's gone out on these universities because of coronavirus financially, and they're out there, they're exposed swimming naked.
Yeah, well, I hope the PM's office, the PM and everybody else who makes the decisions on what runs in these inquiries support Hastie on this push. I heard about it today and I spoke to him, so I think it really needs to happen. Rowan, I've got to ask you, this World Health Organisation inquiry, they're over in China, they go there to have a look at all the COVID sort of ins and outs. They didn't even go to Wuhan. What do you make of that?
But it's a bit like Indiana Jones going to look for the Ark of the Covenant up in northern Canada or somewhere or other. I mean, what a farce. They're going to track down where the Wuhan virus comes from, and they don't go to Wuhan. It's a kind of the reverse of taking Coles to Newcastle. But we know the World Health Organization has formed. They're in China's pockets. They've been in China's pocket all along. They originally, as late as February, late February, was still saying that you couldn't get any human-to-human transmission from the virus. So their credibility is zilch, zero, nadia, zip. They have zero credibility on the coronavirus, and which also adds to the hilarity today of our Deputy Chief Medical Officer saying that hydroxychloroquine can't be any good because the World Health Organization told us it's no good. Well, they have zero credibility, and we should be listening to doctors, not them.
All right, well, I will be tuning in to you tonight, of course, but tuning in to you and the whole Outsiders team on Sunday for your wrap of the US political race and, of course, the President's speech. Thank you, Rowan Dean. Thank you, Mark Latham, as always.
Thanks Peter. Thanks, Rowan. Cheers.